Howdy my totally as always Tubular gamers, we are back with another video. Now, for month of spooky, I thought I would talk about some zombie games. In the prior video, I talked about the very worst zombie games ever. There were some real stinkers in there, but for today, we're going to be taking a look at the other side of zombie games, the very best zombie games. Now, when it comes to video games and zombies, they really do go hand in hand. Zombies have been there pretty much the entire time that video games have existed. I mean, who doesn't love fighting off or killing zombies? Obviously, zombies are very prevalent in really every type of media, but there's just something different about zombies in video games, whether you're killing them, fighting them, hiding from them, running from them. It's usually a pretty good time, and throughout the years there have been some really, and I mean really kick-ass zombie games. So today we're going to be talking about the 20 best zombie games ever. But before we begin, I do have a few ground rules. First off, this list is in no particular order. Actually ranking these games would be a very gargantuan difficult task, and I don't know if I could actually do it. Second off, I haven't played every single zombie game. I have played a hell of a lot of zombie games, but not all of them. For instance, I've never played either of the State of Decay games. I just have never gotten around to them, so there's your honorable mention, State of Decay 1 and 2. They're not on this list, never tried them. The third rule is only one game per franchise. Otherwise, this list would be just completely dominated by a few franchises. So there's only going to be one Resident Evil game on this list. That doesn't mean that there's not a ton of amazing RE games. There is, it's just I'm picking only one for the sake of variety and to keep things interesting. The last rule I'm putting down is that the game has to actually be about zombies. Zombies need to be the focal point of the game. There are lots of games that have come out with zombies in them where it's not the focal point. A great example is the Call of Duty series. There's the Zombies game mode, and that is super popular, but I wouldn't say COD is all about the zombies. The zombies are not the main focus of Call of Duty, never have, and I doubt it ever will be. So we're looking at games that focus on the zombies rather than games that happen to feature zombies. And as always, I'm open to suggestions. Let me know down below if there's any games I missed or games I should have included, or maybe you got some recommendations for me. I always love reading and lurking in the comments. Let's get to the video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you so much. Let's get to them ZAMBI games. So you know we got to start out with a classic, and this game absolutely is that. Here we have the original Plants vs. Zombies. Now, I absolutely love this original game. I played it way back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and really got into it. Like, I played the shit out of this game, and I know that a lot of people probably look at this now and kind of laugh and go, really? You played the shit out of this? It looks super basic and like a Flash game. Yeah, I absolutely did. I thought it was incredibly fun, engaging, and it was very unique for the time. It's incredibly creative, and all these years later, it's still so much fun. It also totally changed the tower defense genre forever. And there are plenty of tower defense games that come out even nowadays that still look to PvZ for inspiration. Like, this game was low-key a game changer, and it's actually pretty timeless, especially when it comes to the presentation. It looked great for the time. This game has a certain style to it, and it absolutely pops even nowadays. And so when it comes to the actual gameplay, yes, it is a tower defense game where you play as the plants, going up against the zombies, defending the yard. It's a very simple premise, but there's actually quite a bit of depth to it. You collect sunlight, and you're able to place down different units in order to stop different types of zombies. It starts out rather simple. It's really easy actually, but as you play more and more, the game actually does get quite challenging. They introduce a bunch of new zombie types, and you'll actually have to strategize like which plant types you want and where you want them, how you can best defend against the zombies, and it is rather simple on the surface, but again, there's a lot more going on under the hood here. What I like is that it's really easy to pick up and play for a few minutes, but if you really put some time into this, it can actually get rather difficult. I like that it really caters towards that casual audience, which this game absolutely went for with mobile gaming, but it also does cater to the hardcore a little bit. There have been plenty of other Plants vs. Zombie games after this, and there's even some really good ones. The Garden Warfare games are actually pretty good, but in my heart, none of them have ever really topped that original game. I dare say that this is actually my favorite tower defense game like ever made, and it really is one of my favorite strategy games. You fight plenty of zombies in it, but the plants, oh, the plants really do kick some serious ass. And if you're interested in this game and haven't tried it at this point, my real question is, why? What are you waiting for? It's available on so many platforms. You can play it on your phone, PC, and plenty of consoles. It's very widely available, and it still is incredibly playable to this day. Alright, I might have started with a classic, but now I'm going to the obvious one. We have the Resident Evil 2 remake. Now, there have been plenty of amazing Resident Evil games, remake or not, and I could have put a bunch of them in this spot, but when I take a step back and I go, which one has the best zombie experience, it's got to be Resident Evil 2, specifically the remake. We're keeping things simple. I think everybody can agree this is a pretty excellent game. And it really is one of the greatest survival horror games of all time. Seeing you play as either Leon or Claire, it has you going through a zombie-infested raccoon city and really just trying to get the hell out of there. The story's great, the characters are great, there's some interesting other characters that show up like Ada Wong, and then when it comes to the survival horror gameplay, it really is second to none, where you get to investigate areas, you'll find clues, you'll pick up items, use items with other things, solve plenty of puzzles, manage your resources, and of course, you'll get to fight plenty of zombies in this game. The combat, it's tense, it's claustrophobic, and it is pretty good. And then Mr. X shows up and everything goes to shit. Like, Mr. X will fuck your shit up. He is not messing around in this game. He is one of the greatest stalker enemies of any video game. And it really doesn't matter how many times I've played this game, he always manages to get me. The game actually has a decent amount of content if you play through the A and B side with the different characters. It's not just a complete repeat where everything is exactly the same. No, there actually is a bunch of differences here, and it very much is worth playing both sides. The presentation is still absolutely fantastic. This is a great looking game. The gore's good, the textures are great, there's a lot of fan service to that original game, and it's pretty crazy just how faithfully this game has been recreated. And I know there'll always be people that prefer the original Resident Evil 2 or plenty of the other RE games, but man, I love the Resident Evil 2 remake. This really is like one of my favorite games ever. It's just such a good time every time I booted it up. It is one of the greatest zombie games, period. So here we got another all-time great when it comes to zombie games, and that is Left 4 Dead 2. I'm not afraid to admit it, I love the hell out of Left 4 Dead 2. I've played so much of this game, it's not even funny. When it comes to zombie killing games, there are not many games that do it better than Left 4 Dead 2, and there's a reason there's still like a shit ton of people playing this game every single day. It's just really that much fun. It takes like everything from the original Left 4 Dead and improves it. It imports all of the maps and the characters and the weapons from the original game, but introduces new characters, plenty of new maps, some new weapons. There's melee weapons. They introduce some new mechanics and enemies as well. There's new zombie types. They actually put these into the Left 4 Dead 1 map, so now those maps are even more varied. The game is constantly mixing things up. While it won't take you all that long to play through all of the campaigns once, the game very much incentivizes and encourages you to play through these campaigns multiple times, since there is this director AI who's constantly just mixing things up, changing enemies, changing item locations, and just being very dynamic. This was not only extremely innovative for the time, but it's actually allowed this game to age incredibly well. No two playthroughs will ever be exactly the same. Sure, you can know like where item locations are, or maybe where like a big enemy's going to spawn, but you can never guarantee that. It's never exactly the same. But also playing through these campaigns are actually mad fun, whether you're by yourself and you've got the somewhat okay AI, or you're with a bunch of friends. Oh, it really is just nothing but an absolute blast. The gunplay and gore in this game in particular is actually really great, where you're just blowing chunks off zombies' arms, legs, heads. It's incredibly satisfying. All of the weapons feel great, especially the melee weapons. And then when the special zombies show up, oh, it just gets even more intense. Some real teamwork is actually needed if you want to complete these campaigns, especially on the harder difficulty. There are plenty of zombie types that can just straight pin down your character, and you're going to need help. And that's why I always recommend playing with, real people. And then the game actually even has PvP, and man, this has some of the best PvP of like any video game. I don't think I've shilled Left 4 Dead 2's PvP enough. The versus mode where there's a team of the special infected and the survivors going at it, it is just so great. There is very few games that I've had this much fun with in the PvP. I'm not even a huge multiplayer guy, especially not nowadays, but Left 4 Dead 2, it really has a special place in my heart. Not only is it like maybe the best cooperative zombie game ever, but it's one of the best co-op games ever. So here we got another legendary zombie game, and that is Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. So this was made by Rockstar Games, and it's the standalone DLC for Red Dead Redemption 1, and puts a crazy ZAMBI twist on things, where John Marston's family becomes infected, and it's up to him to figure out how to get rid of these zombies, really save his family. Eventually, you gotta save like a whole freaking town. This campaign is actually pretty awesome. While it's not as long as the main game, it's an incredibly fulfilling endearing, memorable experience. Like, it's going to live rent-free in your head for quite some time. Even if you play a bunch of zombie games, I'm sure you're going to be able to recall Undead Nightmare. It's just low-key an unforgettable experience, and it really is one of the greatest DLCs ever. Sure, it was released standalone, but it also was available as a DLC, and man, DLCs do not get any better than Undead Nightmare. So it really is just more of Red Dead Redemption 1. You get to go to a few new areas, you get to fight plenty of zombies, and then all of the great open world action that was in the first game, it comes back here. You get to ride around on your horse in a not so big area. It doesn't take an eternity like the second game. You get to lasso people up. You get to go into Deadeye and blow some zombie heads off. You get to defend a town, help out some other people. There's some really crazy side missions in this game, like the one with Bigfoot. I'll never forget the Bigfoot mission. Not only is it hilarious, but it's just wildly entertaining through and through. That is what this game is. It's incredibly entertaining. While it doesn't reinvent the Red Dead wheel, and the zombies don't change all that much to the gameplay, it still mixes it up enough, and the core gameplay is good enough that yeah, it's a very good experience. And hey, the day I'm recording this, I'm seeing that Red Dead Redemption is coming to PC finally. It's about damn time, and yeah, it's gonna have Undead Nightmare. I remember the multiplayer was actually pretty sick for Undead Nightmare as well. I wonder if it's gonna have the multiplayer. Probably not. The multiplayer in Red Dead 1 is kind of underrated these days. I'm getting off topic here. Undead Nightmare is not something that should be missed if you like zombies or zombie video games. You won't regret this one. Alright, here we finally have a not super well known zombie game, and that is the Zombie Army Trilogy. So this is a spin-off of the Sniper Elite series, where you get to kill a lot of zombies. Originally there was Sniper Elite Nazi Zombie Army 1 and 2, but they ended up packaging both of them together with a brand new third campaign to make the Zombie Army Trilogy. And yeah, this is a great zombie killing experience. You kill a shit ton of zombies in this game. It is not even funny how many you kill, and in such gruesome ways as well. The game brings over the Sniper Elite gore and X-ray kill cams, so you are just mutilating these zombies. You're blowing their brains out, blowing up their arteries or their heart or their testicles. Yes, actually, whether you're by yourself or you're with 3 other buddies, it is certainly one of the most violent zombie games of them all. They are very linear experiences where you're literally just moving forward, killing basically everything that isn't your teammates. Occasionally you have to hunker down and defend an area. Some like to be suicide bombers, and sometimes you really just get overwhelmed by the sheer number of them. It's not even funny. While you do get a bunch of weapons in the game, it absolutely still focuses on the sniper. The sniping in this game feels just as excellent as really any of the Sniper Elite games. Sure, the kill cams and the feel isn't as precise as say Sniper Elite 5, but this did come out a little bit before, and at the very least you are getting 3 pretty solid campaigns here. I wouldn't say really any of them are better than the other. The first game is just Sniper Elite 2's levels backwards. The second game actually has some new areas, and the third one has a few more objectives that show up, but variety is clearly not something they're going for here. There is a little bit, since there is a bunch of different enemy types and they like to mix things up. Some zombies are actually super buff and can just straight up take a bunch of headshots, but they all come together for a pretty complete package. You're looking at a solid like 7 to 13 hours here, and yeah, it does start to get a bit repetitive, especially if you play it in long bursts, but it really is a fun time. It's about as mindless as it gets, but sometimes you really just need or crave those mindless zombie killing games. There was eventually a 4th game, Zombie Army 4 Dead War, and while that is a pretty good game, I still prefer Zombie Army Trilogy. Maybe it's just because it's 3 campaigns in one, but also the trilogy just has this certain vibe to it where it's like a horror B-movie that I really dig. But man, do I love killing zombies in this game. So here we got the newest zombie killing game on the block, and that is Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Now, I could have had several Dead Rising games here. I really do love the entire series outside of 4, but when it comes to what I believe is the best Dead Rising game, yeah, I'm probably going to go with the Deluxe Remaster. While it doesn't outright replace the original game, it is easily the definitive way to play the original Dead Rising, and it really is the best Dead Rising experience, at least I feel so, where you play as Frank West, a photojournalist who goes to this mall in Colorado after hearing crazy things are going on here, and oh yeah, crazy things are. Our favorite Z creatures show up here. And yeah, the entire game takes place in this mall. I love the atmosphere and vibe of this mall. It definitely feels like a horror B-movie. The game in general absolutely nails that kind of atmosphere, and while the story is kinda goofy and rather predictable, I still enjoy it, and Frank is great. This is the deluxe remaster, whatever that means, and it does look significantly better than the original, but they kept all of the old animations, so it still looks mad goofy. It looks even goofier than the original. but they certainly kept the gameplay and the focus intact from that original game. It is a relatively hardcore experience where you're on a pretty strict deadline. The entire game runs on this internal clock, and certain events happen at certain times, and if you're not there, you're screwed. You're gonna have to reload an older save or start over. And this game can actually get rather challenging at times. The zombies can really mess you up, and when you start the game, Frank really sucks. He's slow, he's weak, and he can't really carry anything, but as you play the game more, as you level up, you get stronger and stronger. The power dynamic is really great. You can pick up just about anything and use it as a weapon, from the most useless of things to stuff that could actually, kill another human being. Just about everything's a weapon in this game, and yeah, it's mad fun. You'll kill a lot of zombies in this game, like thousands. And the game doesn't feel anywhere near as clunky as it originally did. The game has a really solid pace throughout, and when you're not slicing zombies in half or throwing goofy shit at them like CDs, you're either helping survivors get to the safe room, who aren't dumb as rocks by the way, or you're fighting the psychopaths. The psychopaths have always been a treat in Dead Rising. Not only are they hilarious, but they're incredibly entertaining, and they actually put up a decent challenge here. Sure, some stuff has changed from the original game, but it's really not a big deal. They still lose their mind. If you're somebody that's always been on the fence about Dead Rising, or you've always heard about it but never tried it, I think the deluxe remaster really is the best way to go. It has all the best elements from the original Dead Rising and modernizes it and makes it a lot more accessible and playable without sacrificing the deep gameplay. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think most people will as well. And so here we have Dying Light. Now I could have gone with the original, the DLC, or the second game, but I'm going with the original. It just kind of hit different. So this game was developed by Techland, who did make the original Dying Light, and this game is kind of the spiritual successor to it, where it is focused on melee combat, but it has another focus: parkour. The game takes place in this fictional Middle Eastern city known as Haran, and it's a very vertical city, so you'll be doing plenty of parkouring, and it feels great. It's extremely fluid, and it's just really fun to actually platform in this game. A lot of people gas up Mirror's Edge's parkour, but I always thought Dying Light had like the best parkouring of any video game, at least in a first-person setting. And then when it comes to killing the zombies, oh, it's really great stuff here. Like I mentioned, it is very melee focused, so you'll be picking up plenty of different melee weapons and just beating the shit out of zombies. And it actually feels very good, much better than Dead Island 1 or Riptide ever felt, that's for sure. It's satisfying, the gore is actually very good, and there's actually some decent enemy variety here as well. It's called Dying Light because once it's no longer daytime, yeah, the game gets a lot more difficult. The zombies are really not messing around at night, and a lot of the time it's better to just run instead of fighting the zombies. And I feel like the first game really nailed the atmosphere and how tense it should be when you're playing at night. Dying Light 2, night never felt as consequential as it does in the first game, where the zombies can really mess you up incredibly fast, at least until you're like at the end of the game. By that point, you're just kind of unstoppable because there are skill points and RPG aspects, and you become incredibly powerful as you play the game. As you kill zombies with melee weapons, you get better with your melee weapons. As you parkour more and more, your parkour gets better and better. There's actually a really rewarding progression system in Dying Light. It's not all peaches though. The story is pretty shit in the original game. I won't mince words here. It's bad. The story's bad, the writing's bad, the main character's just awful. There's very little that's good when it comes to Dying Light's story. You can play the entire game cooperatively, which is cool, and the game has the DLC where you drive around in the car that is also quite fun. Here we are almost 10 years later, and yeah, the original Dying Light is still pretty great. It's one of the best open world zombie games of that era, and it still is very enjoyable nowadays. I like Dying Light 2, but yeah, it just doesn't hit like this original one hit for me. So here we actually have a multiplayer focused game, and that is DayZ. Now I know DayZ is not everybody's cup of tea. Plenty of people hate this game, but I always enjoyed it for the most part. I actually put a lot of time into this game in the 2010s when this game really was all the hype, when it was still in early access. So if you're unfamiliar, or I guess really if you just forgot all about DayZ, it was that huge, insanely popular survival multiplayer game where it took place during a zombie apocalypse in this massive map, and it really was all about trying to survive. Along the way, there were plenty of hazards to worry about, like the weather, zombies, and of course other players. You could play by yourself or you could play in a squad, and you really were just all trying to survive. And I remember just how tense this game would actually get for a few reasons. A majority of the gameplay really is just scavenging around, looking for literally anything. Clothes, food, water, weapons, armor, legit anything you could get your hands on. And that's because you'd really need to defend yourself not only from the zombies that could actually seriously mess you up incredibly quickly, especially if they had the numbers game, but other players as well. While there were some friendlies, most people were pretty mean and they were just going to kill you immediately and take your shit. And so, yeah, you spend all this time scavenging and then you can lose it all like that. It was incredibly punishing and it was just a tense situation. I remember whenever other players would show up, my asshole would clench up, I'd start to get hella sweaty. I wasn't sure if it was fight or flight out here. I was like, oh boy, am I about to lose hours and hours of progress getting all this shit? Or all of the boys and I going to get wiped out? And a lot of the time, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But I kept jumping into it because it really was just so much fun. And then, of course, when you're the asshole and you're killing everybody, it's pretty fun. But you could also do plenty of other things to try to survive. The one thing, though, that I always hated was playing this game at night. Playing this game at night is just a miserable experience, so always try to play during the day. Throughout the years, there have been plenty of updates with DayZ, and while I personally haven't gone back to it in many years, I do have a lot of fond memories with that original early access release, and yeah, it was pretty good then. It is kind of sad though how it's low-key been forgotten because Battle Royales really were like the evolution of games like DayZ and just completely took over. They took out all the boring shit and just made it all exciting, and yeah, that's just kind of what we've come to. But if you remember DayZ, you probably have some good memories with it as well. And so here we have yet again Transformers Devastation showing up on one of my lists coming out at, okay, no, I'm just fucking with you. We actually have Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. Now when it comes to narrative-based zombie games, it really doesn't get much better than the Telltale Walking Dead series. Well, I think the entire series is good. Some games are clearly better than others, and they really never top that original game. That original game just had such a long-lasting impact. It really shot Telltale to the stratosphere, and to this day, it's one of the best narratives of any video game, where it's about this man named Lee trying to protect this little girl named Clementine from a really destroyed, zombie-infested world, and yeah, plenty of shit goes wrong in this game. The story is incredibly emotional, the characters are very well written, there's plenty of memorable moments, and even as somebody who loves The Walking Dead, I still found it incredibly unpredictable. It was just a really powerful story through and through. Graphically, they try to make it look like the comic books. It has a really nice cel-shaded art style, and I've always really loved the aesthetic of the Walking Dead games. When it comes to the actual gameplay, it's more like a graphic novel than a point-and-click adventure game. Yeah, you do get to walk around in a few areas, talk to some characters, interact with the environment, but there really isn't a whole lot to this. There isn't any puzzles or really anything like that. You do get to make some choices throughout the game, and yeah, that will affect the fate of some characters, how they view you, and it kinda affects the story, but not really. It's going to tell its story regardless of who you side with or what you choose, and it is a very good story. That's why you're playing this game. It's for the story, the emotions, the characters, and to find out what happens, and in that sense they absolutely nailed it. While there have been plenty of Telltale games since this first Walking Dead season, none of them have ever hit really like the original season did. And it's not only one of the best zombie games ever, but it's one of the best narrative-driven video games to ever release. It's a great game. While we're talking about the best zombie games, you know we have to bring up the House of the Dead. There is not a more iconic zombie game from the 90s than House of the Dead. It was incredibly popular in arcades, and I legit still see it in arcades to this day. That or I see House of the Dead 2, but for today, I'm not talking about any of those older games. I'm talking about House of the Dead Overkill. This is probably my favorite in the House of the Dead series, specifically the PC version that brings back Typing of the Dead. And all I gotta say is this really is one of the best rail shooters ever, and if you're looking for a game where you kill just a shit ton of zombies and it's as mindless as it gets, look no further than Overkill. This game has a grindhouse aesthetic and vibe and feel to it, and it's incredibly corny along with cheesy. The dialogue and the writing and the characters are just so wacky and crazy in this game.
I'm gonna rip your motherfucking balls off. What the fuck?
I was listening to that.
You fucking think because you scored us this fucking popsicle ride, you can play that shit?
Hey, that there is country western's finest.
You are one fucked up fuck. You know that?
And I don't think I've ever heard a game drop so many F-bombs in the span of like 2 or 3 hours. It's pretty funny stuff. The story is very wild and all over the place about these two agents trying to take out this, we will just say terrorists, but what it involves is shooting the hell out of absolutely everything, and that you get to do. It's a very solid rail shooter. seeing you go through a good number of levels with pretty varied objectives, you know, shoot this zombie, shoot that zombie, shoot the boss, don't shoot another human. Okay, it's not exactly varied, but the game's like 2 or 3 hours long, so it doesn't get repetitive or stale. It's got a great pace to it, constantly keeping things interesting. There's tons of bosses here, and the bosses are, at the very least, varied enough to the point that they don't all feel the same. And again, the story is just so entertaining that after you finish the game, you're probably going to want to go back and play it some more. And if you're playing on PC, yeah, they bring back typing of the dead. So how fast can you type? The faster you can type, the faster you'll kill these zombies. And they'll have you type in some weird ass words. They got you typing up like herpes and rabies and retard. Like, I'm not even kidding. They got you typing some unhinged nasty shit in this game. But to wrap things up, this is one of the best rail shooters ever. And yeah, it's just an incredibly fun time. There aren't anywhere near as many rail shooters as there used to be, which always makes me sad, but hey, at least we got this game. It's pretty awesome. Alright, so here we got a small little indie game. I don't think anybody's heard of this one. I think it's called like First of Us. Oh no, that would be the prequel. So The Last of Us, yeah, that's what I'm pretty sure it's called. That's what my notes say here. While this game might not immediately strike you as a zombie game since the zombies don't, you know, look like traditional zombies, I mean, it's pretty much a zombie game about Joel and Ellie going across the country, getting into plenty of skirmishes, and lots of bad things happen. Yeah, the story is kind of good in this game, you know. It has a decent moment or two, you know. The characters might be likable on like a good day when there's no rain or anything, and there's no giant hurricane attacking Florida and it's not 110 outside, then yeah, I think the characters might be pretty decent. When it comes to this gameplay, it's a nice over-the-shoulder, third-person, narrative-driven experience where you do get to do some shooting, there's some stealth elements, a bit of crafting and survival elements, and well, it's not the most complex or in-depth. It all comes together for a really satisfying, engrossing experience that probably shouldn't be missed by anybody. It's not really available on anything, unfortunately, but if you happen to see it and you haven't tried it, you should probably try this game. I think they might even be making a show for it. Maybe. I'm just not really sure with this one. It's just such an underground, obscure title that I don't got all that much to say about it. But this Last of Us, yeah, it seems to be pretty good. People seem to like this one. The few people that have played it. There might be a sequel, but not really sure about that one.
You need to shut the fuck up.
Okay, if you didn't click away by this point, yes, The Last of Us is one of the best zombie games of them all. It's available on PS3, 4, 5, and PC. It's an engrossing experience and has one of the best narratives of any video game. There's a reason it really is one of the most beloved video games of all time, and yeah, it happens to feature zombies. Sure, it's all about fungus, and they're not out here eating brains, but it's close enough to the point that yeah, I would say The Last of Us is a zombie game, and I prefer the first one over the sequel. And if for some reason you haven't tried this game yet, it's in your best interest too. So here we have another multiplayer focused game that I just don't talk about enough, and that is Killing Floor 2. Now, I absolutely love the original Killing Floor. It's actually like my most played video game of all time. Seriously, I just played the shit out of that game. But Killing Floor 2, it's definitely the better game. While I don't have 600 hours in it like the original, it's a much better experience. So the game sees you taking on waves and waves of zombies, or as they're known in this game, Zeds, and while there might be a generic one or two, you know, ones that'll grab you and take a bite out of you, there is a ton of enemy variety here. There's ones that shoot fireballs at you, ones with giant arms. In fact, there's a few with giant arms. There's ones that scream at you. Yeah, there's a good amount of variety here, and there's actually bosses. Like, of course, my favorite, the Patriarch, you know, the one in the pipe guy.
This is the end of you, one in the pipe.
So while Killing Floor 2 might have some other modes, Killing Floor and its sequel really are known for being horde-based shooters where you play through a set number of rounds really just trying to survive on this map. What's really great is that in Killing Floor and its sequel, you can never just camp in one area. There's no good camping spot. The enemies are rather strong and they'll gang up on you incredibly fast. The game also changes how many enemies you're going to fight per wave based on the difficulty and players. If you're playing on normal and you're by yourself, there might only be like 20-30 enemies. If you're playing on hard and there's 6 players, there might be a few hundred. And some of these games can get pretty long, and then at the end of it you fight a boss. What makes Killing Floor also really great are the weapons. Killing Floor has always had some really kick-ass weapons. In the second game, it really is no slouch. All of the weapons feel just positively amazing, and they all have this amazing kick. They just feel great, and the Zeds get just torn to shreds by them, especially if you're using a melee weapon. There's several classes in this game, and they're all actually pretty different from each other. You'll be using totally different weapons, and they even have somewhat different playstyles. For instance, the medic, they're going to be healing a lot of people, or there's the commando who focuses on machine guns. There's the support class, which is all about shotguns and ammo. etc., etc. It keeps the game fresh. These maps also keep the game from feeling stale. They are incredibly well designed. There's a lot of official maps, but there are so many community maps in both Killing Floors. I played more on the community maps than the official ones. At this point, there are hundreds, thousands, even dozens of community maps, and they're all over the place. Shit like Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings or Mario levels. Like, I could be here all day talking about what I love about Killing Floor. I'm gonna stop here and just say it's one of my favorite zombie killing games ever, and it's a great cooperative experience. So here we have a game that you probably don't think of immediately when you think of best zombie games, but we have Lollipop Chainsaw. And if you're somehow unfamiliar with this game, well, you're in for a wild ride. It sees you playing as Juliet, a high school cheerleader who's just trying to live a normal life when all of a sudden zombies show up. Yes, but it's okay because she's from a long-standing lineage of zombie killers. Yes, her family also kills zombies, so she gets out her trusty chainsaw and starts hacking and whacking away at these zombies. When it comes to the gameplay, it is a very basic hack and slash from the early 2010s. There isn't a lot of combos or depth with this game, but it is still pretty fun. The chainsaw can be satisfying, and while it does feel awkward at moments, it all comes together to be a half-decent character action game. But really what made Lollipop Chainsaw as popular and as good as it is the vibe, the aesthetic, the music, how everything just comes together. It is a very weird, wacky game. The story is all over the place, the writing is hilarious, and it really just tries to go balls to the walls crazy in like every aspect. Not only is the story and characters just wild, but the enemies, the fights, the scenarios you get into, yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. The game has a rather goofy, lighthearted tone to it, and honestly, I eat that shit up like my Wendy's spicy nuggets. I love what this game is putting down. Yeah, it doesn't take itself all that seriously, but not every game needs to. I mean, it was directed by Suda51, who also made No More Heroes and Killer 7, so I don't really know what I was supposed to expect here. The game has a very 2012 aesthetic to it with this ugly ass filter, but hey, the licensed music is actually really great in this game, more than just Lollipop. All of it's good. And then there was also a very recently released remaster of this game, but I have zero experience with it. I've only messed around with the original, and I plan on only playing the original. It's a good game, and it's a solid, entertaining 4 to 5 hours of fun. So here we got a pretty deep cut, a very personal pick of mine. If you played Xbox Live in the late 2000s or early 2010s, specifically the indie games, you'll probably be familiar with this one. It's I Made a Game with Zombies in it. It's a top-down twin-stick shooter where, yes, you kill lots of zombies. It's a fun, simple, short, basic little shooter where you go and shoot up a bunch of zombies and other creatures. You can finish it in under 20 minutes. It has a very simple art style, but the main developer did sing his own theme song, and it's actually pretty awesome. And the best part, this game was sold for 99 cents on the Xbox Live Marketplace. Sure, nowadays it's nothing special and it belongs on a phone instead of a console, but I actually have some fond memories with this one. It's a fun little time, and I thought I'd have a little deep cut like that. Unfortunately, you can't get it on its native platform since the 360 Marketplace was shut down, but I'm sure you can find other ways to play this game. Hey, the song at least is mad good. And so here we have Dead Island 2, which came out back in 2023. I'm still shocked that this game is any good at all. It was in development hell for seriously like 10 years, and then it ended up actually being not only a good game, but easily the best Dead Island game. Like, Dead Island 1 and Riptide certainly have their moments, and at times they're pretty fun, but Dead Island 2 is just a much better experience in my opinion. It's not crazy far off from Dying Light, but it definitely has its own spin on the zombie genre. It is still very melee focused. But instead of parkouring, you have, well, you don't have anything instead of it. You just beat the shit out of zombies. The game is not an open world game, seeing you go through these small zones, completing quests, side quests, and yeah, just beating the shit out of as many zombies as you possibly can. You can upgrade your weapons, give them little perks or elements, you level up your character, and yeah, you just kill a lot of freaking zombies in this game. It actually feels like a fun throwback to the 360 era. Games didn't need to be super complicated or have all these crazy mechanics. Sometimes if you've got satisfying combat, decent enough progression and pacing throughout the game, that's all you really need. The game doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't even do anything all that different from the older Dead Island games. It's actually very similar. It's just the most refined, it's the best levels you'll go through, and it's incredibly satisfying to smash heads, rip arms off, and really just smash these zombies to pieces. The gore is actually very good. The graphics in general are pretty good in Dead Island 2. Something though that this game carries over from The first game is the pretty dog shit story. It's just not very good in this game either, seeing your character stuck in a zombie infested LA after their plane crashed into the city. They gotta just try to get out of the city. There are several classes to play as, but they really aren't all that different from each other for the most part. And like the first Dead Island, you do eventually get guns, but it is very much a melee focused game. And if you asked me which game had better melee combat, Dying Light or Dead Island 2, I'd probably say Dead Island 2 is the better combat. I think Dying Light overall is the better game, but the combat in Dead Island 2, it really is great. It feels really nice, and again, it's very satisfying. Dead Island 2 might not be the most creative, original, or innovative zombie game, but it still is a very fun time, and the whole game can still be played cooperatively, so that's pretty cool. Again, I'm just honestly shocked it was any good. Usually when games are in development hell like this, they're just awful, but not Dead Island 2. It was actually good. So here we have one that I'm sure is going to divide people, and I have ZAMBI, originally released for the Wii U, known as ZAMBI U. It was the British Ubisoft developed hardcore launch title for the Wii U, but eventually it was released on other platforms. While this game certainly does have some issues, I still think that it is a pretty decent game overall, and hey, you do kill a lot of zombies. So the game takes place in 2012, which, you know, was modern day at the time, lol, but it sees you playing as a human survivor in a zombie apocalypse. The game actually has a pretty whatever story, unfortunately, and it doesn't really feel like it ever goes anywhere. It also doesn't really have many memorable characters, and the main reason for that is this game actually does have a permadeath system. Yeah, when you die, your character is done. I remember this was one of the key features of the game, and I feel like this technology would go on to be used in like Watch Dogs Legion low-key, but it still was very unique for the time. It's honestly even unique nowadays. No two characters are exactly the same, all with their own strengths and weaknesses, and if you die, you gotta go get your stuff back from that character. And collecting stuff you absolutely will be. This is a survival horror game. You'll actually be managing resources, you'll have weapons that can and will break very easily. Outside of a cricket bat, there's ammunition and guns, but these are pretty rare. And of course you could just avoid the zombies, but I mean, who's gonna do that in this game? Who's gonna actually, yeah, you should probably avoid a lot of them. You'll be investigating areas, just trying to figure out what's going on and going from point A to B. I remember on the Wii U version, you would actually use the gamepad for a lot of the investigation stuff. There was actually a lot of gimmicks with the Wii U gamepad, including multiplayer, which were removed for the later version. I remember this game had a pretty decent sense of exploration. It really would try to reward you if you went off the beaten path and looked around, and that's good because actually fighting the zombies was never all that fun. It was okay, and the weapons feel okay at best, but this certainly is not Dying Light or Dead Island. I remember most of the game was me just smashing the cricket bat against the zombies' heads, and a lot of people felt the same way, that it was just kinda dull at times. Something this game absolutely nailed back then, and even nowadays though, is the atmosphere. It does have a very strange, different, strong atmosphere from most zombie games, and it's unique even to this day. Like I said, the game has some unique ideas, but I feel like the game really fails to make the most of them. I feel like a sequel to this game would have actually been a huge improvement over the original one, but this game was just a mega flop, and so they canceled that. So as it stands, we have a pretty decent zombie experience that has some ups and downs, but at the end of the day, yeah, I'd say it's alright. So here we have everyone's favorite zombie game, Days Gone. Now when Days Gone came out, it was pretty negatively received actually, but throughout the years a lot of people have gone back and said that this game is actually way better than anybody expected, and I didn't play it at launch. I played it like 3 or 4 years later, and I thought it was actually pretty good. Like ZAMBI, it definitely has some issues, but for the most part, I really enjoyed Deacon and his story and killing the zombies. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic Oregon, and sees Deacon just kind of aimlessly surviving after he lost his wife, and he doesn't really have much reason to live, but he stays alive with his weird buddy Boozer, and they kill lots of zombies and mutter to themselves like absolute psychopaths. But in all seriousness, I think the story of Days Gone is actually pretty good. While it does start out very strange and the pacing's kind of all over the place, it has tons of great moments in the ending. Yeah, it is actually really good. That, and it's actually connected to Siphon Filter, which will always be wild to me. When it comes to the gameplay, this is a big ol' open world where you go around on your motorcycle, you have to manage some resources like your fuel and health, ammunition, etc. There are plenty of main quests, side quests, and lots of zombies to kill, like lots of zombies to kill. While the game starts out pretty basic with its zombies, it quickly starts throwing in some other variants, and by the last third of the game, it just goes absolutely freaking nuts with how many zombies are on screen. I actually forgot that this was like the main selling point of Days Gone, so when I first got to the part where there's just a shit ton of zombies, my mouth just like dropped. I was like, oh my god, there's so many zombies here, and you just mow them all down. The gunplay is actually really great in this game. It feels great. Killing the zombies feels good. Oh, I'm sorry, they're not zombies, they're freakers. Well, I'm freaking out when I gun down like 50 of them in the span of 30 seconds, and yeah, it is actually pretty fun. Sure, this open world doesn't have the most innovative, revolutionary gameplay loop. It isn't all that different from every other Ubisoft or PlayStation open world game, but it's still a compelling gameplay loop, and the game just had a very different vibe or atmosphere from most AAA games. I really could appreciate the setting. I can appreciate Deacon. He's actually a pretty good character, and riding around on the motorcycle was fun. I really liked managing your fuel as well as you coast down the hill. And I thought there was at least a few unique ideas here, but certainly wasn't reinventing the motorcycle wheel. The pacing was also pretty terrible in Days Gone. It definitely does not respect your time. It takes just way too long to finish this game, but at the end of it, I still thought it was a satisfying experience. Clearly, this game isn't for everybody, but I think most people nowadays can enjoy Days Gone, and I do recommend it. So here we have another multiplayer-focused zombie game, but this is the last one for today, I promise. It is 7 Days to Die. Now, I've never talked about this game before, and I don't know if I'm ever going to talk about it again, but when this game was in early access in like 2015, 2016, I actually played the hell out of this game. I just had a lot of fun with my friends on it. I usually don't get into survival games like it all, but there was something different about 7 Days to Die. It is voxel based like Minecraft, and I remember the physics were just fucking stupid, at least back in early access, and it allowed you to do some really funny stuff, but it is a survival game where you're managing all of your resources, and it's called 7 Days to Die because if you get bit by a zombie, yeah, you only got 7 days to live. But to get back to those resources for a second, there's tons of materials, kind of like Minecraft. Of course, there's your food, your water, ammunition, health, etc. You'll want to make a base, you'll want to fight off the zombies, and it absolutely is one of those games you need to play in co-op. I could not imagine playing this game single player. It would probably be just kind of awful. I remember having a lot of fun just building a base, defending against zombies, defending against other players. In that sense, it's not all that different from DayZ. This was back when there was tons of zombie survival games, and the two that stuck out to me were DayZ and 7 Days to Die. 7 Days to Die had plenty of issues. It was incredibly buggy. Like I mentioned, the physics were pretty terrible. The graphics were just straight up awful. But it didn't really matter to my friends and I because the gameplay loops were actually quite compelling. The game was decently satisfying when everything came together. It was fun. It was fun to have a base. It was fun to kill stuff. The enemies were hilarious in this game, not just because they were bugging out all the time, but the zombies were just dumb as rocks. There'd be these giant bees that would attack you that just looked absolutely ridiculous. And this game just had a certain vibe, a certain atmosphere to it that I found incredibly enticing. I remember playing this game for like a month straight. We played it non-stop, and then one day we logged into the server, a bunch of people showed up, they destroyed our base, they killed us, they took everything, and all of our progress was gone, and we never played it again. Here we are, like 10 years later, and I still haven't tried it again. What I was shocked by is that it left early access. The game actually hit 1.0 in 2020. After like 10 years, it came out, and yeah, I'm sure it's better. It's probably better. It still looks like shit, though. This was a fun little survival game, but I don't exactly know if I could recommend it nowadays. At least I got my fun memories with it. So here we got another game most people probably didn't expect to see on here, but I have Evil Dead Regeneration. While there are plenty of just mediocre, so-so Evil Dead games, Evil Dead Regeneration is actually pretty decent. It's one of the better zombie games, it's one of the better licensed zombie games, and it's easily the best Evil Dead game. The game actually has a very intriguing premise where it's a what-if storyline where Ash wasn't sucked up by the portal at the end of Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness never happened. Instead, the police show up and Ash is considered crazy, so he goes to an insane asylum, and then an evil doctor gets his hands on the Necronomicon, and it's up to Ash to stop him. The story, it's actually pretty intriguing, and Bruce Campbell returns for this game. He's great. And when it comes to the gameplay, it's a standard hack and slash from the mid-2000s. It's not as complex as, say, Devil May Cry, but it's not super basic either. Ash has unlimited ammo for all of his weapons, much better than some of the other Evil Dead games, and you really are just hacking away with your chainsaw, you're blasting shit with the boomstick or several other weapons, and you're killing plenty of deadites. And yes, Deadites are close enough to zombies that this is a zombie game. It very much looks like a game from the mid-2000s, and it plays like a game from the mid-2000s. Coming back to it, it is a little clunky, it's a little stiff. There are some moments where you aren't Ash, you're this little dude named Sam, and these are kind of whatever. But at the very least, it does add some variety from all of the combat. The pacing is pretty good throughout. It's only like 4 to 6 hours. It's not too long, but it's a fun little experience. If you like Evil Dead, you're gonna like this game. If you really like Evil Dead, I think you're gonna love all of the references and fan service, and this really is a must play for all the Evil Dead diehards. But at the very least, I think this is a pretty underrated little license game where you get to kill lots of zombies. I should have had this in my underrated license games list, but I honestly just forgot about it. I'm not forgetting it this time. I got it, and if I ever have a part 2 for more license games, I'm gonna have this one on it. It's a good time. And so the last game we're talking about today is Dead Space, specifically the Dead Space remake. While the necromorphs aren't exactly the most traditional zombies, I don't know what else I'd call them other than zombies. Dead Space is all about space zombies when you go to this abandoned ship, trying to figure out what exactly happened to the crew, and then, yeah, it's pretty obvious what happened to the crew. This is a decently scary game, filled with tense claustrophobic moments, like when you're trying to go through these very narrow corridors and all of a sudden coming out of the vents and drains and lockers all these necromorphs show up. But it's also pretty fun. You'll absolutely get to wreck these fools with your plasma weapons, like the very iconic plasma cutter. Instead of going for like headshots, the way you defeat these enemies is actually by taking their limbs off. It was incredibly creative for the time, and all these years later, yeah, it is very creative. It's still a fun, unique way to approach combat. And it leads to some very gory encounters. Like, this is a very violent video game, and it's not afraid to be as violent as possible. Isaac will absolutely get fucked up by these things if you don't fuck them up yourself. This game has a great, tense atmosphere. The story's actually pretty good. And in the remake, Isaac actually speaks. I know not everybody likes this, but I like it. I think the story's even better than the original game, complete with the same ending as the original game. While there have been plenty of Dead Space games after the original, I really do think the remake is the best of them all because it has the best atmosphere, it's the scariest, and I feel like it just got the combat the most right. Like the original game, it's an absolute classic. The second game, it's actually pretty great also. The third game, it definitely has some issues, but I like it. The remake, it feels like it's just the best of all of them. And I'm hopeful we get a Dead Space 2 remake, but I'm also very doubtful because this is EA. At the end of the day, when it comes to space zombies, I don't think it's ever been done better than Dead Space. It's a very memorable, iconic survival horror series for a reason. After Resident Evil 4, people wanted that next survival horror experience that would be like it, and a lot of people were disappointed by RE5. Then Dead Space showed up and a lot more people were all about it. I'm kind of rambling at this point. Dead Space is a great game. All 20 games I've talked about today are good to great, and I recommend about all of them. And that's really it for today's video. Hopefully there were some zombie games you really like. If you made it to this part of the video, comment whale. I see you down below, my fellow whale. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.